And good afternoon from the Oklahoman's Video Studio. I'm Dave Morris. It's time for our weekend review from the political side of things. Joining us from Washington, D.C. via Skype, there you see him, Chris Castile. Sir, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Dave. Thanks. How are you?
Well, I'm doing well, and you had a bit of some breaking news. I'm actually tired of the word breaking news, aren't you? It's just, here's some new news, if you will.
New news. Yeah.
But this involved U.S. Representative Markwayne Mullin.
Right. I'd asked I'd asked this actually months ago, and they never got back to me about whether Representative Markwayne Mullin represents a huge swath of eastern Oklahoma, a Republican, intended to stick to his pledge to serve only 3 terms in Congress, 6 years basically. And so I asked again because filing period for the elections is coming up in 2 weeks in Oklahoma. And, I asked him, his office, and Representative Jim Bridenstine's office, is this the last time these guys are going to file for the House office? And I got a statement today from Mullin saying that basically, because this would be his last time to file, his last 2 years, his last term under his pledge would end in 2018, saying, well, at this point, we plan on sticking with it, but, however, we're also praying about the future. So he opened it.
Kind of leaves the door open there, doesn't it?
Definitely. So, and there, I think, when I've talked to congressional staff, Oklahoma congressional staff, there's been some feeling on their part that maybe Congressman Mullin was having second thoughts. Not so much Bridenstine. And I haven't heard from him yet, but I think pretty much everybody thinks Bridenstine will leave after 2018, and Mullin, might not.
What's the point, just from a broader look at this, what's the point of a politician saying, hey, I'm only going to be in here for 6 years? Is that just kind of a way to appeal to the constituents, to appeal to the residents by saying, hey, I'm not a career politician, I'm going to get in here, do the work, and then move on?
That's precisely it. There's Tom Coburn did this, and in that same district that Mullin represents, it was drawn differently then, but it was the second district, much of eastern Oklahoma, talked about being a citizen legislator, not giving up his being tethered to the community and being, still tied to his profession and everything, that this wasn't going to be a full-time job for him. So, and it's easy to say when you haven't served. Now, obviously, Tom Coburn kept his pledge when he was a U.S. House member, stayed from 94 to 2000, then he didn't actually even fill out the entire 12 years in the Senate. But once you get up here and you realize a few things, but one of them is that it takes a long time to establish yourself and get things done. 6 years goes fast. You're still kind of a nobody. You haven't really climbed up in seniority on your committees, and you're not taken seriously enough for the most part, to get your amendments at the front of the line. And really, you're just kind of finding your way around. It seems ludicrous, but, 6 years really can be kind of a short time in Congress. And I'm not trying to, say I'm for or against term limits. That's just a fact. It really is a town built on seniority. So, but if you're going to make that pledge, you probably ought to stick to it. I think, the only time that there was some question about whether an Oklahoman, at least in my 25 years here, was J.C. Watts, who a lot of people thought had made a pledge of 8 years. I think it was 8 years. And I, for the life of me, I could never find it in print. And this is in the age of the internet, but I called some people in that district and thought, there was just kind of a feeling, a sense that JC had term limited himself. Anyway, he eventually left, but I think just opening the door crack, as Congressman Mullin has done, could present some political problems for him. Maybe not this time, but if he were to try to run for a 4th term, which would violate his term limit pledge, and then I think it would, there would be some pretty strong political opposition there to him.
It's a story that Chris Castile, as we're talking to him via Skype from Washington, D.C., filed online at newsok.com. You can read more about that online and, of course, in upcoming editions of the Oklahoman. You mentioned J.C. Watts. Of course, he's now over at Feed the Children. Another story you have recent coverage, and something we talked about last week on this program, was the Supreme Court hearing arguments on how shall I phrase this?
The birth control
The
mandate.
birth control, yes.
Right, right. And this is again, we talked about how this was sort of chapter 2 of this. First we had Hobby Lobby, which was a closely held for-profit company that objected to some of the contraceptive methods and won that case narrowly, 5-4 at the Supreme Court 2 years ago. So now we have about 24 groups, religious nonprofits, from nuns, Little Sisters of the Poor that have a charity in Denver, to 4 colleges, Christian colleges in Oklahoma, that are challenging the contraceptive mandate. They actually don't even have to provide contraceptives. They just have to opt out. They just have to tell their insurance company or the Health and Human Services Department, we have religious objections. We're not going to offer contraceptives. That sets in motion their notification. That triggers a process by which the health HHS then goes to the insurance company, says, hey, we got to provide this coverage separately. The employer can't be charged for it. It has to be separate from that policy. But it is actually still the same insurance company. And the nonprofits say, hey, you're kind of you are hijacking our insurance companies, and you're making us complicit in this just by triggering this whole process of you setting up. So bottom line is, you came out of the oral arguments in that a week ago feeling like it was probably going to deadlock at 4-4 because you have a vacancy on the court since Justice Scalia died in February. It's 8-8. It's 4-4 as on a lot of things. You've got 4 liberals, 4 conservatives, and it really looked like this was going to deadlock. And if that happened, they could either decide to just totally rehear the case, or all of the lower court decisions, the federal appeals court decisions, were going to go into effect. And almost every federal appeals court that has heard this issue of this opt-out process believes that it doesn't substantially burden these groups to do this opt-out process. In other words, they lost, and they were going to have to start complying with it if there's a deadlock. So yesterday, the Supreme Court said, hey, they came out with this extraordinary order. It wasn't signed by any of the 8 justices. They basically said, give us some new legal arguments, written legal arguments in the next few weeks about a process by which these organizations, the universities, the nuns, don't have to notify anybody that they object to this. All they have to do is have a plan, an insurance plan that doesn't include contraceptives. Then the insurance company itself will know that they don't provide any kind of birth control or certain kinds of birth control, and they will take it upon themselves to work with the administrator. And it seems to me like it seems to everybody who's following this case like this is a way that a compromise the court's looking for to try to avoid a deadlock in this case. And
so is this the court buying some more time in this case?
I think it's looking for a way to not deadlock on it, to come up with some kind of decision on it that, maybe satisfies both sides in this sense. The religious nonprofits don't have their religious beliefs violated, but the women who work for them who don't necessarily share those beliefs still get the kind of birth control they want. That would be satisfactory to both sides. They don't want their religious beliefs violated. The women want their birth control. How can this happen? How can you get this done? That's what the court's looking for. This case has been going on. These cases have been in the courts for years. They start down at the district court level, work their way up to the federal appeals courts. Now they're at the Supreme Court, and the court looks like it made deadlock on it. So I think what they're trying to avoid is years kind of quote down the drain of this litigation without some kind of real legal resolution to it.
So if they're asking to file new legal arguments, what's the timeline on that?
I think the last brief has to be in by April 20th. So we're still probably looking at a decision by the court in June, unless they deadlock, and they may announce that beforehand, or they may announce we're just going to have to start from scratch with this.
What are we seeing so far with the 8 justices? Are we seeing a lot of 4-4? Has that made any difference so far?
There's only been 2, and one of them, which was this week, was pretty significant. It was a labor case having to do with who could be required to pay in public unions like teachers. public sector unions. Do you have to, pay dues, or, are you part of the union if you're not paying the dues? And that case deadlocked, and the public sector unions won it. And I think in 20 states, some of the big states too, these public sector. So that one was significant. It really was. The other one was, I couldn't follow the significance of it so much. It had to do with a bank loan, but they deadlocked on that one. But this one, the Texas abortion case, if those cases deadlock, that'll be really significant.
We are talking with Chris Castile via Skype he's in Washington, D.C. We are in downtown Oklahoma City. Last Friday, we had Terry White, commissioner of the mental health department here in Oklahoma, addressing the budget cuts that her department was going to make. You had a story earlier this week that the Obama administration said on Monday that expanding Medicaid could provide coverage for 71,000 people in the state and reduce by 12,000 the number of Oklahomans experiencing depression. What are we looking at here, Chris?
Well, you're looking at money that the federal government has been offering for years to the state of Oklahoma and about 20 other states to expand their Medicaid programs to 138%, to everybody who makes 138% of the federal poverty level or below. And that would include a lot of Oklahomans. It's well over 100,000. I can't remember what the exact number is, how many more people would be eligible for Medicaid if Oklahoma expanded it. But they drilled down what the administration did, because they've been focusing a lot on behavioral issues with the opioid, heroin addiction issue lately, and who can get treatment. And so what they found in these states that haven't expanded Medicaid, mostly in the South, mostly red states, just to put it that way, in the South and West, is that, so let's look at how many people, just kind of based on the general population of Oklahoma, how many, receive mental health services now, what percentage of those people were likely, to receive mental health services if they expanded Medicaid to this population. It was a lot. It was 71,000 Oklahomans they estimated would be able to receive mental health services that aren't getting them now.
So is this a deal Governor Mary Fallon saying, hey, within 3 years, even though it's paid for now, within 3 years, the state's on the hook for more expenses? Is that one of the reasons?
That's what they've been saying for the last 4 or 5 years, Dave, that Medicaid expansion ultimately would be too expensive for the state. The first 3 years of expanding this population of people who would be eligible for Medicaid, totally 100% paid for by the federal government. After that, it slides down to 95%, the federal government share, 90%, stops there at 90%. But even that 10%, according to the governor and other Republicans, would be too expensive for the state. And this really has become, and it always has been, expanding Medicaid has always been a partisan issue. The Supreme Court made it optional for states to do it, and almost all of the states, except for a few, were run by Democrats. John Kasich in Ohio, the presidential candidate, is one of the few Republican governors who embraced expansion of Medicaid. And Louisiana just decided to expand it because they elected a Democrat for governor. So, the states are literally, Oklahoma is literally giving up billions and billions of dollars. And again, we talked about why, but the healthcare professionals there, the hospitals there, I think they just shake their heads about it.
We should say the Oklahoman is hosting tonight a mental health and the justice system as a community forum. It's over in the Plaza District. It's at 6:30 tonight. Our Jacqueline Cosgrove, who covers mental health issues and stories for the Oklahoman, will be hosting and moderating this discussion. Again, it's free. It's community forum, mental health and the justice system. Plaza District tonight at 6:30. Chris, before I let you go, let's talk about the presidential race. Marco Rubio is asking party leaders not to release 172 delegates he won. I assume that includes Oklahoma. We've talked about this before, the brokered convention. Is that realistic at all for the Republicans, or is this going to be Trump versus Clinton, who are the two front runners at this point?
Dave, I don't know if I want to say realistic. I just don't know. I think anybody who, any talking head is guessing right now what could happen. It's very possible, statistically, for Donald Trump to win a majority of the delegates necessary. I think the stat that you see all the time, because I think it's correct, is that I believe Trump has to win 54% of the remaining delegates to get to the majority and win the nomination, whereas Cruz has to win, I believe, somewhere in the 60%, and Kasich, it's actually impossible. Even if he won every single delegate left, he wouldn't have enough. So I mean, his only shot at it is a brokered convention. But it is unusual for Rubio to be doing what he's doing. And last night, with Trump saying that he's not necessarily going to support the eventual Republican nominee, now you've got them all saying that basically. And, that's just extraordinary. There's always tension in these primaries between the top. There was, I've talked about this before, about the Hillary and Obama supporters in 2008. There was a lot of bad feeling left over in 2008, and people, a lot of Clinton supporters went to the convention in 2008, and it was hard for them. They just felt that they had been wronged, and every loser does in these contests. I mean, I even remember back to 2000, the Democratic primary season between Bill Bradley, the former New Jersey senator and basketball player, against Al Gore. There was like a lot of hard feelings left in that one, and there was even speculation that Bradley wouldn't endorse Gore at the end of that. So some of this isn't unusual. The level of it, the kind of guy that Trump is, has made it obviously, extraordinary.
Well,
Everything that was involved in,
Well, and extraordinary, and we saw the video that came out this week, and the Trump campaign executive charged with assault.
Yep. Grabbed a female reporter on the arm. All she was trying to do is ask a question, and then he denied it, even though there's video of it. So, as you and I have said, it's just beyond really any kind of rational discussion of it.
Well, I have appreciated this discussion. We've been chatting with Chris Castile via Skype from Washington, D.C.
I wish I had something intelligent to say about it. I just don't. I do want to say, though, you mentioned Jacqueline Cosgrove's work on this, on mental illness and the mentally ill people in the criminal justice. It's just amazing. She has done such great work on the mental illness problem in Oklahoma.
And it's important work, and you're exactly right.
Very
Jacqueline
important. That's a great word for it. It's so important.
She does a good job of covering that. It's 6:30 tonight, that forum. I mentioned the community forum, 6:30 tonight at the District House in the Plaza District. I should also mention, I don't know if I did earlier, we will be live streaming that on News OK tonight.
I hope everybody watches.
Should be a good discussion. Sir, I've appreciated this discussion. I'm actually headed to your neck of the woods this weekend. Looking forward to catching up.
Hope you make it by.
All right, more political coverage from Chris Castile can be found online at newsok.com and, of course, in the Oklahoman.